Welcome to State of Ed, a podcast about education inside the classroom and out. My name is Marc, and unfortunately Nick Simone is unable to join me today here at EdCamp Long Island 2019 in Commack, New York. I believe it's the first time I'm flying solo, so I'm going to do my best to keep everything afloat. If you recall, Nick and I came to EdCamp several years ago when they were just kind of starting up, but now it's the 6th annual EdCamp and the attendance has grown. I'm going to hopefully get to talk to some of the organizers here today, as well as a whole host of educators who have made the trek out here on a Saturday morning. It's completely voluntary, and they're just here for their own edification. They're here for their own empowerment. They're here to become even finer educators than they already are. I'll also be hosting a session on creativity and innovation in the classroom. So I'm looking forward to bringing all of that to you here from EdCamp Long Island 2019. How you doing? This is Mark, and this is the first session here at EdCamp Long Island in Commack, New York. I'm here with Jessica, Kim, Ed, and Jan, and we're here to discuss podcasts and how to utilize podcasts and what is a podcast and how do you get started and everything else. But first, let's just kind of go around the table and just state your name and tell us a little bit about what you're currently up to in the world of education.
Sure. My name is Ed Murray. I am the Educational Technology Specialist in Baldwin Schools. I'm split between the middle school and the high school, so I work with teachers in both of those buildings. I do one class at the middle school, which is an introduction to computer programming, and then the rest of the time I support teachers in the classroom using technology. So that could be modeling how to use technology, co-teaching, instructional planning, and doing different workshops.
Hi, my name is Kim Lynch. I am a 5th grade teacher in East Williston. I teach ELA and social studies. I am also now starting the podcast club at my school with another teacher. So trying to figure out what I have to do.
You're in the right place.
Yeah.
Good morning, my name is Jan Kassal. I'm parent and I go through many meetings in schools and outside of the schools. And I am going to participate in a TED Club. So for me, this system settings of podcast might be quite useful if I learn it.
Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Morrocu, and I currently am an intern at Josephine McNeil Elementary School in Hempstead, raising awareness about speech and language in the school districts and how to collaborate with teachers.
Wonderful. So welcome, everybody. So let's just start with some of the nuts and bolts of podcasting. Obviously, one of the benefits of podcasting is that you can go ahead and connect with people all over the world, literally, and it's very inexpensive, relatively inexpensive to start. Just a little bit about the setup that you're seeing here today. So for those of you who are listening, we're in a classroom at Commack Middle School, and we're sitting around like a horseshoes type table, and I have a 3 microphone setup. So I have the main microphone that I would typically use for when I'm doing my podcast, just with me speaking. And this is an Audio-Technica AT2020. This is a USB microphone, which basically means that it plugs into a USB port. That would typically go directly into the USB drive of my Mac laptop. But in this particular case with a 3 microphone setup, there's only one port in the MacBook. So I had to figure out how to get 3 microphones to work into one port. So I just went on Amazon, and for I think $10 or $8, I bought a USB hub. That USB hub connects up to 4 microphones. You can get them to connect even more than that. And this way I can turn 3 microphones into one USB port input, and that goes right into the MacBook. And I'm using GarageBand, but there are all other kinds of applications that you could use. These smaller mics are Samson Go mics. They're about 1/3 of the price of this one, and the quality is almost identical. So they're really, really great, high quality, small microphones, which is something if you're starting, for example, Kim, your podcast club and you don't have necessarily a lot in money, although, talk to Ed. Ed's usually really good. Ed Kemnitzer
Go right to him.
is her tech guru in her district, but go to him and he'll, I'm sure, set you up with all kinds of good stuff. And of course, you can start off very inexpensively, and then there's no limit to how much you could spend if you want to go there are microphone stands, and then there are shock absorbers. So if you hit your hand on the table, it doesn't reverberate through the mic stand into the microphone. For me, after we record, I'll typically go and edit down the audio just to try to take out a lot of the uhs and the me scratching my head and trying to figure out what word I want to use. And for that, I use Final Cut just because I'm comfortable with Final Cut. But you could use literally any kind of software that edits files. So as a tech person, Ed, I don't know what your comfort level is if you're a Mac guy or a PC guy. What do you typically use for these kinds of projects?
So I use a variety of devices. Today I have a Chromebook with me, but I also have a MacBook. In the school, we've been starting to move more towards Chromebooks. So we've been looking at tools to record podcasts that are more web-based. We did a pilot with a health class last year, and we actually recorded the podcast using Padlet. You went to the website and just created a new recording using that. It doesn't have the editing features that something like GarageBand has. And then our tech director went to ISTE this past spring and met with like Soundtrap there. So we have a subscription to that, which we're looking to test out this fall with some groups. So I haven't used that yet. I'm excited to get started and check it out.
Yeah, it's interesting you mention that because nowadays companies are trying to make things easier and easier and more user-friendly for everybody. So that's a wonderful thing on a Chromebook, on an iPad. Like in my district, we have a one-to-one iPad initiative. So the iPad apps are great to kind of get started. You can jump right into the water. It's shallow. You're not going to drown. You can figure out how to get things done. As you start to work on those tools, though, you start to find very quickly that they're very limiting. So they're great for getting started, but if you want to do more innovative things, more specific things, you'll find that you don't have all the controls that you maybe want to have quickly.
So what software, for example, you have ready?
So I don't know exactly. The club has been going on for a couple years, and I'm just kind of stepping in. I know they have iPads. I know there's an app of some sort that they're using, but I'm not exactly sure. So, yeah, not much information.
Okay.
So all in a podcast is, when this is all said and done, it's just an MP3 file, just like a song that you would listen to on your iTunes.
You said you mix, not mix. You edit it in the Final Cut. Isn't Final Cut, or I know Final Cut as video editing.
Right.
So you use this just without any image, just for the sound.
Exactly right. But it's quick and easy for me because I'm used to it. But again, it's a matter of personal preference. There are so many tools. I'm sure now there are apps that are just like one-stop shops where you can record, edit, and just share right out of the app, which is great. And probably I'll wind up switching one day, but it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. But really, so at the end of the day, it's just an MP3 file, and you can share it the way you would share any kind of file. But like I said before, there's the inexpensive way, and then of course you can get to the more expensive side. So for the case of State of Ed Podcast, my podcast partner and I, unfortunately he couldn't make it, we set up a website. We use a company called Libsyn. Libsyn is, I think, the largest podcast distributor in the world. They have, I think, 1 million or 2 million podcasts on there. And what they do is I'll upload these files to Libsyn. Libsyn will just take care of kind of packaging that and sending it out once I put the file in there. And then we'll put that on our website. It'll go automatically to Apple Podcasts. And so people who are subscribing, they just have to open up their podcast app and it'll just, the newest episode will appear there. But so it's just a great way to get your voice out there in the world. And what we're trying to do with State of Ed Podcast is just be part of the conversation and raise topics that are interesting to us, and we hope will be interesting to people who are listening, and meeting educators and people who are interested in education and hearing their stories and listening to what they can contribute. And a little bit later today, I'll be talking to some of the organizers here at EdCamp, and maybe somebody will listen and hear that and start an EdCamp somewhere else. And that's the whole idea of just trying to get ideas out in the world. So what's the objective, Kim, of your podcast club?
So I think the objective has been to kind of just get students' voice out there. It's supposed to be completely student-run, so they're the ones creating the podcast. They're choosing the topics and the conversations that they're having. So I definitely want to keep it as that. I mean, of course, that seems to be working. But I guess I was just trying to find ways to make it more accessible for them. This seems to me like a hard setup for a student, so I guess I'm just wondering, what's good tips for them to use?
Honestly, what you could do is something as simple as take your phone and just hit record and put it on the
Right.
table and let them talk. And that's a podcast, just like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
you're
we
right.
did for that project with the classes when we used Padlet. We just went to the website and we had a Padlet board created.
Mhm.
And then when you create a new post on the board, you could choose audio recording and you record up to 15 minutes, which for a student podcast would be more than enough time.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
most of them we found were between like 3 and 5 minutes. They're doing a research project and they just kind of talked about their research. So,
Fantastic.
Now, regarding this three mic setup, did you have to find on the laptop some mixing pult and like balance these mics so one is not overpowering the others?
So I wish I was that sophisticated and that I could that I had the head for that. I try to get the best quality sound that I can get without spending a whole lot of time balancing EQs and stuff like that. There are EQ settings, and I could take more time, but I usually can kind of take care of those things on the edit side.
Later you will reduce my voice.
No, your voice is perfect now. When I record with my partner, we're usually in separate spaces, and we record using like FaceTime or Google Hangout. So that could be an assignment for
Yeah,
your
that's
kids,
interesting.
Kim, where they don't have to be in your club. They could actually be on a Google Hangout. As long as they're each recording their own individual audio track, you can sync them up later. So he'll be in his home, I'll be in my home, and we'll be looking at each other and having a conversation, but we're each recording our own individual track. So when I get his track, I don't hear my voice at all. I only hear his. And I'm sure there's a way to record off of, right off there, but then I lose control over, when his dog barks or something like that. I want to be able to take that out. But if it's all bled into one audio track, I lose a lot of that control. If I was in the middle of talking and the dog barking would be in the podcast. And this is the whole point of using technology. This is about like promoting your thought, your creative and innovative thought. So if you're running into an audio problem and it's not syncing, well, what solution can you come up with? There's the money solution where you spend thousands of dollars on a professional, whatever it is, or what's the free solution where you're just using your brain? And that process is the most valuable part of the whole experience for the kids. At least I feel, because the chances of them having that podcast that becomes the global phenomenon is slim.
Right.
Not impossible nowadays, but they're pretty much just doing it for the exercise of getting to express themselves and contribute to a conversation and use their voice. So Jessica, you've been quiet. So on the speech pathology side, how could you perhaps incorporate podcasting into the work that you're doing with kids?
So most of the kids that we have, they're very unmotivated, and I feel like a podcast might encourage them to speak their voice, and they also come from low socioeconomic status. So like that's also a way that it could be free or cheaper, and that way they can raise awareness, they can put their thoughts, feelings into it, and no one's going to judge them, and everyone else can kind of contribute to it as well.
That's great.
Try to make like a podcast club maybe.
Yeah, so maybe you should reach out to Kim
Yeah.
and find out all the secrets of how they're doing it. And but again, it could be as simple as a phone. So Ed, tell us a little bit more about the kinds of things that you're doing in your technology role and how you're helping to shape educational experiences for kids.
Sure. So I'm working with 2 classes in the high school right now. One of the classes is called New Media, and the other one is Digital Journalism. So there's some overlap in content for those 2 classes. For the New Media course, they're starting out with blogging, and they're going to work over the next 2 quarters with different things like creating videos. We'd like to see them create a podcast, create web pages about the things and topics that they're learning about. I just worked with them this past week as they're finalizing their first blog post, and they were talking about digital citizenship topics. And then for the digital journalism class, they're just finishing their first project where they used Adobe Spark to create a graphic poster where they introduced another student in the class. You work with a partner, you interviewed them a little bit, and then you create a poster about your partner using Adobe Spark. And the purpose of that was really just to get familiar with Adobe Spark and the other members of the class, because we'll eventually use the video tool in Adobe Spark and the web page tool So those are some of the projects I'm working on right now at the high school.
Wow, that's great. Is Adobe? Oh, so these are all high school kids. So is Adobe Spark a free application, or is that you have to pay for that as part of the Adobe package?
So for Adobe Spark, it is a free tool. You could sign up with your Microsoft account or Google account for just a personal version of that. And there is a limited amount of storage for the free version, and they put like a little watermark, but they also have an education version, which our district set up last year. So we have it set up with our Google accounts. They sign in, and that takes away that storage restriction and that watermark. So yeah, it's a great, very easy to use tool. For the video editor, it's very similar to something like PowerPoint or Google Slides, where you add different text, images, or videos into it. And then they have a microphone button where on each of those slides where you add that content, you can hold down the microphone and narrate those slides. So it's a really easy to use video tool.
And how did you come across it? Like, where do you find all of your new tech ideas?
A variety of spaces. Sometimes it's attending events like this, like EdCamp, and learning about new things. I follow a lot of different blogs, and I use Feedly to follow those blogs. I use a little bit of Twitter. I'm not as active on Twitter as I'd like to be. And then there's another app I've been using recently called Nuzzle. And what that does is you log into it through your Twitter account, and it looks at the different people you're following and the articles and things that they're posting. And if there's a lot of articles that a lot of people you're following are posting, it will show you those. So it's another way to really kind of find that content that people are talking about.
Oh, wow. How'd you come across Nuzzle? I've never heard of it.
I think I was just looking at a way to kind of make sense of Twitter, because a lot of times I don't check it as frequently, and it's just trying to sift through all that content that's posted on a regular basis there can be overwhelming. So an app like Nuzzle, once you follow all these people who are sharing great content, it really aggregates it for you.
So I wonder if the Twitter people like Nuzzle or hate Nuzzle, because Twitter is just designed to feed into your addiction to just get more and more stuff. Like, you can never refresh the screen and not see another
Right.
series of posts pop up. So it's just designed to keep you on there. So
Yeah.
Nuzzle sounds like it's kind of aggregating your content in some way to help streamline things, so you don't waste your time doing the thing that I spend all my time doing, which is just
Absolutely.
flicking down on the screen.
So I could check Nuzzle like every other day, and it's really going to just pull in the content from the past couple of days that people have been posting about. And one of the other features I've started to use too is there's a friends of friends feature
Mhm.
where it takes the people that your people are following and aggregates that as well. So it's a really great app if you're looking to kind of make sense of the articles and resources people are posting on Twitter.
It's developing so fast that it seems to me that infancy stage is ongoing for several years, because as I said, the apps are being released on monthly basis, new and new. So it's all in infancy for several years already. It doesn't stop, and I don't think it will ever stop, because one application now develops another application.
It's making me think of, I think it was Ed Chemnitzer that brought it up, that it's so easy to just use technology for the sake of technology, but that's not always effective. You really have to think about the form of technology that you are using, and is it helping or is it just filling the time? And that's kind of what I was thinking about the whole time you were speaking about it.
So what's the cure for that? How do
I
you
know.
monitor that? How do you change that behavior?
You're right. It's tough to evaluate that and see. But I feel like if you look how the students are reacting to it, if they kind of get into that like screen zone time and they're ignoring everything else around them, maybe that's not effective. But if it's something that's interactive in the whole classroom and it's getting everyone involved, maybe that's a way to look at it. I think podcasting is such a great stepping stone for that. It feels like they're safe behind the screen, but their voice is getting heard, and hopefully they'll build confidence and be ready for a TED Talk or something like that. I think.
Right.
Actually, last year at EdCamp, I heard the Mineola teachers talking about their TED Ed camp, and it sounded like it was, taking off and changing the experience for so many students.
That's exactly, I was there as well.
Oh, fantastic.
And it motivated me, and I was talking to the principals at our schools, and they could not, it's a contract. They would have to allocate money and the
Right.
teachers' time to it. They said, no, we don't. So we just, as parents, jumped
took care of
on
it.
and took
That's
care
great.
of it. Yeah.
Last question. I'm going to put Ed on the spot.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure you appreciate that. So, as the tech guy, what's the next big thing that we should all be keeping an eye out for that's going to perhaps be a game changer in the classroom?
So I keep hearing more and more things, not just in education, but just in technology in general, about augmented reality and virtual reality. One of the reasons I've hesitated to get onto that bandwagon with those things is because it seems like a passive experience for students, and I'd really rather see students be creators with it. So one of the tools I was really happy to see Google release within the last year or so is they have a Google VR Tour Creator, which allows students to use Google Street View images, and they can also take their own images that they've captured on their phones and annotate them, so you create your own VR tour experience. So, whether you're doing like an ELA lesson and want to take a look at the setting where that story took place, they can create their own VR tour about that. You could see how that could be used in a social studies class. We've had some teachers do it where students create like a college tour about a college they're interested in, research that college, and then use the Google VR Tour Creator to use the Google Street View stuff that's available from that college to annotate it. So I think that's a great way to transition it, to allow students to be creators with that rather than just have it as a passive experience.
Do you have a 3D printer in your school?
So I believe our technology department at the high school has a 3D printer. I don't believe we have one at the middle school. But that's another technology which I think is really interesting. I haven't really seen a great classroom implementation of that yet. It's like one of these technologies. It's like, this is a great piece of technology. I just haven't really seen the connection yet to curriculum.
So here's my thought about
Okay.
that, because I've been mulling this over, because we have a 3D printer,
Okay.
and it is a very fine collector of dust, and I want to find a way, and we're all coming across the same problem that you're expressing it. So what I was thinking is, like, wouldn't it be great if you're in a living environment class to create a cell, or to create, if you're in psychology, create the brain, and then identify the different parts of it, and anything that allows them to go ahead and create aspects to demonstrate their understanding of what they've learned.
Mm-hmm.
Or even, I would love to have students design their own game, and then design their own game pieces with the 3D printer so they can physically play the game that they made. So everything would be completely student designed. Or at the very least, let the chess club kids design their own chess pieces and then play with the pieces that they created. I feel like we have to find those kind of applications, because right now it's just some student has an interest in a dinosaur, so he makes a dinosaur, and it's wonderful.
Pretty low level, that technology.
Yeah, and he made a dinosaur, and that's great. But then what?
Right.
So, and I think that's a perfect way to end. This is just about and then what. Thank you so much, Kim and Jan and Ed. This was a great session, and hopefully you were able to take some things away from here. I definitely did, and I'll be putting your Twitter handles up on our website, and some of the things that we discussed. Thanks so much for joining us for the session, and I hope that you create podcasts and get your kids' voices out there and your own voices out there as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.